Ladies and gentlemen, could you please give the warmest of welcomes to the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, the Right Honourable Arlene Foster.
My goodness, what a welcome. First of all, I'll say it's a great pleasure and privilege to share a platform with John and with Mark and, of course, David and Martin. And a great pleasure to be here with an organisation which was founded, really, amongst other things, to keep the memory of that great speech by Margaret Thatcher alive from 1988. Central tenet of that speech, of course, was that the European Union should be an economic project and not a political one. And it came at a time when Jacques Delors had set out his vision for a united Europe. But our then Prime Minister had a very different vision for this country. And as she said then, there's no point throwing back the frontiers at home only to see them replaced by Europe and dominated by Brussels. But that was in 1988, when I was, believe it or not, a schoolgirl. I know you're all going, that's not right. Couldn't be possibly right. But fast forward to 2015, 2016, and things were certainly on that trajectory towards a federal Europe. The experience is over, and David has mentioned them, the exchange rate mechanism and the move towards a single currency in Europe showed that rather than being based on economics, this was most definitely a political union and a political project. But thankfully, we stayed out of the single currency, despite all the portents of doom at that time, you may recall. When you look at the recession of 2008 onwards, we witnessed the huge damage inflicted to other European countries who didn't have monetary control. Thank goodness we did have control, and we did have sterling. And so when David Cameron went to Europe looking for reform, let's be honest, reform was never on the agenda with Europe. If there are any problems in the European project, the answer is always more Europe, not less. So we had the referendum. We had that referendum. We fought it in Northern Ireland. We were the only party who came out and campaigned for leave in Northern Ireland. We had Sir John Major and Tony Blair telling the people of Northern Ireland that if they voted leave, goodness knows what would happen in Northern Ireland. We'd probably have the terrorism back that we had in the 1780s. That was quite disgraceful, ladies and gentlemen. Quite disgraceful. So the referendum came and went. We had a clear nationwide result and have spent, as John has said, well over 3 years ruminating about it all. And we wonder then why ordinary voters are so fed up with politicians. Of course, in Brussels, they all think we've lost our mind. And from the beginning, a hope has prevailed that we would do as the Republic of Ireland did over the Lisbon Treaty and ask the question again and get the right result on the next occasion. But at the heart of this is a fundamental misunderstanding of the British psyche. It's very straightforward. You ask us what we wanted. We told you in huge numbers, some people voting for the first time in a generation, and now we expect you to deliver. That's straightforward democratic politics. And we must do just that. We must deliver Brexit. Otherwise, and Mark has referred to this, that social contract between voter and politician will be irrevocably broken. Something that's completely missed by the Remain elite. And I listened last week after the Supreme Court judgment, and I think Martin's going to talk about that, to all the lectures on democracy without a hint of irony or self-awareness. Now, there will be a feeling of why from our voters, why in heaven's name would we vote again? And that disconnect, that very strong disconnect with democracy, it should matter to those of us who are called to be politicians. And we are called to be politicians. Sometimes people have a lot to say about politicians, but I see it as a calling, actually, a calling to public service. And therefore, if we care about that, then we should care about the people who put us into these positions. And we may be in a comedy store at the moment, and no doubt there'll be much made about that by the journalists in particular. But there is nothing remotely funny about a breach of trust. And here's the good news. I believe the Prime Minister does get that Brexit has to be done. A lot of others do not, but I think he does. And I think it's important to say that this afternoon. I want to say a little bit about the backstop. It would be wrong to have a politician from Northern Ireland and not talk about the backstop, isn't that right? So, this, of course, began as a European Union proposal and first appeared in December 2017 in the joint report. And in its first iteration, we had to make it very clear to Theresa May that we were opposed to it. And that pressure resulted, as you will recall, in a number of changes, including the addition of another paragraph, paragraph 50, which looked at what was called the Stormont Lock. But in the subsequent March 2018 proposals, of course, that was all gone, and the European Union had rewound on the changes that we had achieved in that joint report. And instead, we had what became known as the backstop. You know, the backstop, of course, is a consequence of, and we could go into this in great detail, about the sequencing of the negotiations. Right at the start, our government agreed to sequencing, which meant that the Irish border had to be sorted out before we even knew what sort of a trade arrangement we would have with the rest of the European Union. How can you sort a border out if you don't know what you're going to be doing in the future? It was always the wrong thing to do by our government, and I want to say that very clearly. So when the provision came out, and particularly the Northern Ireland-only backstop, it was that Northern Ireland would have a sea border between ourselves and Great Britain. The sea border would be there with no democratic accountability, no end date, European Union regulations as a means of all-Ireland harmonisation, and alternative arrangements left as a political promise while the backstop was given full legal authority. Is it any wonder that Martin Selmer is apparently supposed to have said to Dominic Raab, Northern Ireland is the price that you will pay for Brexit? Now, that sort of language really belies what was going on in the European Union. But of course, our Prime Minister now, Boris, has written a letter to Tusk, and in it he puts it very clearly to them for the first time. He tells them that the backstop is anti-democratic, it is inconsistent with the sovereignty of the United Kingdom, we are indefinitely kept within the European Union without an exit, there would be a border down the Irish Sea. And so he says very clearly that the backstop risks weakening the delicate balance that is there within the Belfast Agreement. And you know, the European Union says they love the Belfast Agreement. They say they want to maintain the Belfast Agreement. And if that is the case, then they cannot support the backstop, because the backstop ruins the Belfast Agreement. The Unionist community do not support the backstop in Northern Ireland. And in a recent poll, 81% of Unionists said they were against it. That's quite amazing for a poll to say that that is the case. So we need to move on and say, and remember, of course, that it was the Brady Amendment was the only thing that got a majority in the House of Commons. The only thing that got a majority in the House of Commons. So therefore, that tells you a lot. So if the European Union and the Republic of Ireland care about protecting the Belfast Agreement, and they say they do, then we need to acknowledge that the backstop doesn't do it, and then work with Her Majesty's government to try and find a way forward. Finally, let me say this. Like Boris Johnson and Margaret Thatcher before him, I know that Europe is not the creation of the Treaty of Rome. Europe existed before 1958, and it will exist long after the Treaty of Rome and after we've left it. And from a local point of view, on the island of Ireland, relationships and communities that existed before our membership of the European Union will continue long after we leave. And I want to say that very strongly, because some people are trying to present Brexit as the end of time. It's not the end of time. We will move on and we will continue to have friendships and socialise and have business with our good friends and neighbours in the Republic of Ireland. Delivering Brexit is respecting the democratic will of the people of the United Kingdom. I recognise it's not what Europe or the Republic of Ireland wanted, but surely even some in Brussels and Dublin realise that it must happen. And then we can build a new relationship, recognising our joint history, our joint geography, but also recognising the will of the British people. I think that's most important. And now, when I was sitting listening to Mark, he was saying he wanted to quote some poetry. I felt under pressure, I have to tell you. I felt under pressure because, of course, Enniskillen, which I am privileged to represent in the most westerly constituency in the United Kingdom, was the place where Oscar Wilde went to school. So I was going, I'll have to give an Oscar Wilde quote. That's what I'll do. And the quote I'm going to use is a well-known one, and it is this. There is only one thing worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about. And that is the truth. We have taken a lot of abuse as Brexiteers. People forget that. People want to concentrate on other sorts of abuse. That's fine. But, you know, we do this because we're called to do it, and we believe it's right for the nation, and we believe it's right for the country. Thank you.
To see our future videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell icon. That way you'll get a notification by email as soon as a new video is available. In the meantime, please do help us out and like and share or retweet this post so your friends and followers can see it too.